My name is Azura. I've been a doctor for almost as long as I've been Axel's wife. We've spent 30 years together, filled with both happy memories and challenging moments, yet it feels like the time flew by in the blink of an eye. Our home, which was big and warm, was always buzzing with life, especially when our sons, Leander and Soren, were little. Leander and Soren were like night and day, so different from each other. But each of them, in their own way, brought joy and laughter into our lives. Axel and I, both being doctors, worked very hard over the years to give our family a comfortable life. Along the way, we even managed to buy a couple of apartments, renting them out to earn a bit of extra income. For a long time, life seemed to be going smoothly. Then one day, Axel came home looking pale and serious, more serious than I'd ever seen him. He set down his medical bag by the door, and with a heavy sigh, he said, "Azura, we need to talk." I felt a chill run through me. He looked right into my eyes and told me, "I got some tests done last week. The results came back, and it's cancer." The months that followed were overwhelming. Hospital visits, treatments, hours in waiting rooms. It all became a blur. Axel fought hard, but the cancer was ruthless. Watching him, the strongest person I knew, become weaker every day was heartbreaking. All the medical knowledge in the world couldn't prepare me for the pain of seeing him fade away. One evening, as we sat together in the living room, he held my hand tightly. "Azura," he said gently, "if things don't go the way we hope, please take care of everything with the boys. The will is all set, and you'll be fine financially." Shortly after that conversation, he was gone. The funeral was a quiet, somber event. Family, friends, and colleagues came from all over to say their goodbyes. But it was the silence in the house afterward that was hardest to bear. His belongings were still in their usual spots, as if he might walk back through the door any moment. A few days after the funeral, I was in the kitchen, trying to decide what to do with all the leftover food, when Leander came storming in. His face was filled with worry and anger. Soren was right behind him, looking like he would rather be anywhere else. "Mom, we need to talk about Dad's will," Leander said firmly, getting straight to the point as usual. I put down the plastic wrap I was holding and took a deep breath. "Yes, I know," I replied. "Your father left everything to me because he wanted to make sure I could manage things." Leander's face turned red with frustration. He slammed his hand on the counter and said, "But what about me and Soren? We're his sons. It's not fair that we get nothing." Soren tried to calm him down, stepping in with a soft voice. "Leander, let's not rush into this. Mom's still grieving, and we can work this out without fighting." Leander shot him a look and muttered, "It's easy for you to say. You're not worried about the future like I am." I leaned against the counter, feeling the weight of both their stares. "Your father and I built this life together, and he trusted me to take care of things. But I understand what you're saying, Leander. I don't want to leave you out. So, what are we supposed to do?" Leander demanded, crossing his arms. "Just wait until you think it's the right time to give us our share?" "Watch your tone, Leander," I said, my patience starting to wear thin. "I'm still your mother." Soren stepped between us, raising his hands as if to keep the peace. "Please, both of you. This isn't helping. Mom, maybe there's a way we can meet in the middle." I nodded slowly, rubbing my temples as I thought it over. "Okay, here's what I'm thinking. The apartments your father and I invested in downtown, they're yours. You each take one. You can live in them or rent them out. They're yours to decide." Leander's eyes lit up, but I held up my hand before he could speak. "And from the savings, I'll give each of you $310,000 to help with whatever you need." Leander bit his lip, thinking over the numbers. "And the rest? The house? The money?" "That stays with me for now," I replied. "When I'm gone, it will come to you, just like your father wanted," I assured Leander. He looked like he wanted to argue some more, but Soren nudged him and said, "Let's think about this. It's a fair start. Mom's not leaving us with nothing." Leander finally nodded, although he still seemed unhappy. "Fine, but I want this in writing, Mom. No more surprises." "Of course," I agreed. "We'll get everything documented properly." As they left the kitchen, I heard Soren whisper to Leander, "Give her a break, will you? She's doing her best." Leander muttered something under his breath that I couldn't quite hear, and honestly, I didn't want to know what it was. As I washed the dishes, I wondered if Axel was somehow watching us, and what he'd think of how I was handling everything. I hoped I was making the right choices, but only time would tell. And time, that tricky thing, isn't always on your side. A few days later, on a sunny afternoon, one of those rare, warm days that make everything feel okay, Leander brought his girlfriend, Talia, over to meet me for the first time. They hadn't been dating for long, but it was clear Leander was smitten. You could see it in the way he fussed over her, which wasn't like him at all. When they walked in, Talia immediately had this confident, almost bold air about her, like she owned the place. She was dressed up and walked right into my living room with barely a hello. Her eyes scanned everything around her, taking in the decorations and furniture. "Nice place you've got here," she said, flipping her hair back as she sat down without waiting for an invitation. Leander sat beside her, grinning like a fool. I forced a smile, trying to be a good host.
"Thank you, Talia.
"Can I get you anything? Coffee? Tea?" "Coffee sounds lovely," she replied, then turned to Leander. "Babe, make sure it's black. No sugar." Leander nodded and headed to the kitchen, leaving me alone with her in my own living room, feeling oddly like I was the guest. The silence was uncomfortable until she finally spoke up. "So, Leander tells me you're pretty well off," she said, her eyes still glancing around at the decor. "I'm used to a certain standard, you know. My parents made sure of that." "That's good to hear," I replied, unsure of what else to say. Leander returned with the coffee and handed Talia her cup. She took a sip, wrinkling her nose slightly. It's all right," she muttered. Then she continued, "Anyway, we've been talking about our future together, planning ahead, you know?" "That's wise," I replied, glancing at Leander, hoping he'd give me some clue about where this conversation was heading. Talia set her cup down, then looked me straight in the eye. "And speaking of planning, we've been thinking about the wedding. I want something special. Leander has probably told you already." She glanced at Leander, who gave her an encouraging nod. "I found this perfect place for the rehearsal dinner, but it's a bit pricey. It's about $40,000. I nearly choked on my coffee. $40,000? Just for the rehearsal dinner? Leander quickly jumped in. "Mom, it's important to Talia. We want to start things off right." I put my cup down, feeling a storm brewing inside me. "Look, that's a lot of money for one dinner, Talia. We need to be reasonable here." Talia's face hardened. "Reasonable? Leander says you have the means. I don't see why we should compromise on something this important." Leander was nodding along with her, but I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. Deep down, he knew this was a big ask. "I'm all for celebrating," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But $40,000 is more than I can justify spending on one meal." Talia stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I'm not used to compromising on my standards, Azura. I made it clear to Leander that I expect a certain lifestyle." Leander tried to calm things down. "Mom, maybe we can find a middle ground." "There's no middle ground on $40,000 for a dinner, Leander." "That's final," I said firmly, my patience finally running out. Talia grabbed her purse and shot me a glare.
"Fine.
If that's how it's going to be, then maybe we need to rethink some things." With that, she walked out, with Leander hurrying after her. They left, and I was left sitting there, stunned by what had just happened. The nerve of that girl, coming into my home, drinking my coffee, and telling me how to spend my money. It felt like a slap in the face, a wake-up call I hadn't expected. A few days later, I wasn't ready for what happened next. I was out at the grocery store, running some errands, when Leander and Talia decided to stop by my house again. By the time I returned home, I could feel the tension in the air even before stepping inside. Soren was sitting in the living room with them, trying to keep a conversation going, but it was obvious things were awkward. Part of me wanted to turn around and leave, but this was my home, so I took a deep breath, gathered my courage, and walked in. Talia, all dressed up as usual, walked right over as soon as I put down my grocery bags and handed me a list. "Azura, we've been thinking a lot about the wedding gifts, And here's what we've decided on. I hope this list makes it easier for you to handle, she said confidently. I took a quick glance at the list and, to my surprise, it was pretty reasonable. It included some kitchen appliances, a nice set of china, and a couple of pieces of furniture. I actually felt a sense of relief. This looks very reasonable, I said, nodding. I think these are wonderful choices. Leander looked at Talia with hope, as if he thought she'd finally settled for something manageable. But then, out of nowhere, Talia's face changed, and she suddenly gasped.
Oh, no.
This isn't the right list, she said, snatching the paper back from my hands. She dug into her purse, pulling out another piece of paper. Here's the actual list, she said, handing it over with a little smirk. This new list was nothing like the first. My heart sank as I scanned through it. It included things like an apartment, a luxury car, an exclusive vacation, and even diamond jewelry. My jaw dropped. Is this some kind of joke? I asked, hoping I'd misunderstood. Talia didn't even flinch. No joke, Azura. These are the gifts we expect. Only the best for our wedding. I looked over at Leander, waiting for him to say something, to object, or to show me he didn't agree with this absurd list. But he just stood there, looking between us, obviously torn but saying nothing. Finally, I couldn't hold back. Leander, why are you letting her do this? You know this is unreasonable. Before Leander could respond, Talia cut in, raising her voice. This doesn't concern you, Azura. You just need to pay up and keep quiet. Soren, who had been sitting there quietly, suddenly stood up, his face serious. That's enough, Talia. You're not going to talk to our mom like that. This is her house, and you're way out of line. You need to leave.
Now.
Talia's face flushed with anger as she and Leander gathered their things. As they walked out, she muttered under her breath, "This is ridiculous. We'll remember this." Then the door slammed shut behind them. I sank into a chair, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on me. Soren sat beside me, putting a comforting arm around my shoulders. We'll figure this out, Mom. But you can't let them push you into giving more than you can or should. It's not right. He was right, of course. But as I sat there with my son, I couldn't help but worry about Leander. How did things get so out of hand? How could he not see what this was doing to our family? The silence in the room was heavy, filled with unspoken worries and fears for the future. I realized then that this struggle was far from over, and it was only going to get harder from here. In the weeks that followed, Leander started calling me constantly. Each call was more demanding than the last. His tone was desperate, sometimes even frantic. "Mom, you don't understand. I can't look poor next to Talia's family," he'd argue, his voice shaky and filled with stress. "You have the money. Why can't you just help me out?" I sat at the kitchen table with the phone pressed against my ear, feeling a knot in my stomach. "Leander, it's not about the money," I explained. "It's about living within your means. Talia's expectations are way too high, and you can't keep up with them without risking serious debt." He scoffed, his frustration spilling over. "What do you know about it? I'm not going to live like a pauper. I need more from the inheritance now. The amount you've offered isn't enough." "Leander," I replied firmly, "I've offered to cover half of the wedding costs, up to $125,000, and to give you a $5,000 gift. That's already very generous. But everything has to be agreed upon with me. No surprises." There was a pause on the other end of the line, then a sharp, bitter laugh. "That's nothing," he said coldly. "You're just being stingy. You have $1 million just sitting there. Why are you holding out on me?" Leander's voice was sharp, filled with anger. "It's not just about the money, Leander," I replied, my patience nearly gone. "It's about not supporting this unrealistic dream that's only going to hurt you." He yelled so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "I don't need this. I'll handle it my way."
Forget you.
With that, he hung up. After that call, months passed without a word from Leander. I tried to keep busy with my routines, hoping he'd see reason. But just as I started to find a bit of peace, the phone rang one afternoon. It was my sister-in-law, Callista. "Azura, I thought you should know." Her voice was hesitant, careful. Leander is flying all the wedding guests to Bermuda. He sold his apartment to pay for it and said you'd make your own way there. He told everyone you weren't interested in helping. I hung up, my heart swirling with anger and sadness. How could he be so reckless and thoughtless? Before I could process what I'd just heard, Soren walked into the room, his face serious. "Mom, there's something you need to hear," he said, handing me a small audio recorder. I recorded their conversation when they were here, in the living room. With a trembling hand, I pressed play. The voices of Leander and Talia filled the kitchen. "Your mom is just a nasty old woman with a fat wallet," Talia's voice said coldly. "We need to squeeze as much as we can out of her, and then cut her off." Leander's voice came next, sounding just as cold. "Whatever it takes, Talia. I'm not going to let her control us. If it comes down to it, I'll kick her out in her underwear." I turned off the recorder, my hands shaking. Hearing my own son speak about me that way was more than I could bear. The room spun as I struggled to understand this betrayal. Deciding to fly to Bermuda wasn't easy. But with Soren by my side, I knew I had to go. Both of us felt tense, yet determined to face whatever awaited us. When we landed and reached the wedding venue, I was stunned by the extravagance. Flowers covered every surface, lights were strung up like stars across the sky, and soft music played in the background. It was beautiful, but it also felt overdone. A display meant more to impress than to celebrate. As we walked in, I spotted Leander and Talia mingling with guests, looking like the perfect couple, all smiles and laughter. My heart ached to see my son caught up in this fantasy. I took a step toward them, but before I could get close, Talia spotted us. Her smile vanished, replaced by a look of pure irritation. She marched over, her high heels clicking angrily on the stone path. "You shouldn't be here," she hissed, stopping just inches from me. Her voice was loud enough to turn a few heads. "This is my day, and you're not welcome." I was stunned, unable to respond. But before I could say a word, her parents, who had overheard, walked over. Her father, a tall, serious-looking man, spoke first. "Talia, that's no way to speak to a guest, especially to Leander's mother." His tone was firm, making Talia's cheeks turn red with embarrassment. Her mother, looking just as upset, turned to me with a warm smile. "Azra, please come with us. Let's find you a place to sit." They guided us to a table at the edge of the venue. It was obvious this spot was an afterthought, tucked away with no proper settings or decoration. The ceremony started soon after, with speeches that felt empty given the tension hanging in the air. Then, unexpectedly, I was handed the microphone. My legs shook, but I steadied myself and stood up, taking a deep breath. "I came here today to wish my son and his new wife a happy future," I began, my voice firm even though my heart was racing. "But I also believe in honesty and integrity, qualities that have been sadly missing in the events leading up to this day." Talia's face went from pink to red, her eyes narrowing at me with anger. "I was asked for money time and again," I continued, "in amounts that no reasonable person would find justifiable. When I couldn't meet these demands, I was threatened with being cut off from my family, my son, and my future grandchildren." My voice cracked slightly, but I continued. Soren, seeing how upset I was, stepped closer, putting a comforting hand on my shoulder. His presence gave me the strength to keep going. I gave Soren a small nod, then pressed play on the audio recording. Talia's voice filled the room, cold and calculating as she talked about how they would try to get more money from me. Leander's voice chimed in, agreeing with her plan, even saying he was willing to leave me with nothing for the sake of his bride. The crowd stirred, murmuring in shock and disapproval. I stopped the recording, and the silence that followed was thick and heavy. "I've given my son an apartment and $25,000, I said, my voice steady. "But it was never enough. Today, I'm making it clear that I will not be treated as an ATM or threatened. I am disowning Leander and Talia. I wish them well, but from this day forward, I am choosing to remove myself from their lives." The reaction was immediate. Talia let out a piercing scream, her voice high and furious. "You've ruined my wedding. I curse you. After everything that had happened, coming back home felt bittersweet. But in the quiet that followed, I made a surprising decision. I quit my job. I had spent years as a doctor, healing others, but now it was time to heal myself and rebuild the life that had been shaken. Soren, bless his heart, had recently graduated from college and was full of ideas and energy. With $27,000 I had given him, Soren opened his own tattoo parlor. But it wasn't just any tattoo shop. It quickly became a place where art and skin came together in beautiful ways. Soren poured his heart and soul into his work, and it paid off. He started entering tattoo contests, and soon his name was on everyone's lips in the local community. Before long, he was opening more locations, creating a network of tattoo parlors that became a hot spot for tattoo enthusiasts. I'd watch him sketch late into the night, his dedication a sharp contrast to the chaos his brother had chosen. "You're doing amazing, Soren," I'd say, pride swelling in my chest. During these peaceful months, Leander reappeared one afternoon. He showed up at my door, his eyes tired and his shoulders slumped, looking like a shadow of the ambitious man he once was. "Mom, I need to talk," he said, not even waiting for an invitation to sit. His voice was weary, so different from the demanding tone I had grown used to. I sighed, motioning for him to continue. "What is it, Leander?" "It's Talia. She's driving me crazy, always wanting more and more." "Nothing is ever enough," he said, his words filled with desperation. "I got a second job, but it's still not enough for her." His voice cracked, and I could see how drained he was. But his regret couldn't erase the past so easily. "Leander, I warned you," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "I told you that living like that, with someone like her, was unsustainable." He rubbed his face, his frustration clear. I know you did. But I thought," his voice trailed off, as if he realized he had no real explanation. "Thought what?" I said, unable to hold back. "That money would just appear because you wanted it to?" My tone was sharper than I intended, years of pent-up frustration making it hard to soften my words. "Look at your brother. He started with the same amount you did and made something of himself without stepping on others." Leander bristled, his pride still wounded. "Yeah, well, not everyone's like Soren, are they? I have rights to the inheritance too, remember? And when you're gone, it'll come to me." That was the last straw. "Get out, Leander," I said, my voice cold and unyielding. "And don't come back. Not this time. You chose your path." His jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought he might argue. But then he turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. As the silence settled, Soren came downstairs, having overheard the last part of our exchange. "Are you okay, Mom?" he asked softly. I nodded, wrapping my arms around him. "I am now, thanks to you. Let's just focus on the good we can do and the life we can build." He hugged me back, his presence a comforting reminder that not everything was lost. In that moment, I knew that despite the hardships, this journey was still worth it. We had each other, and that was enough to keep moving forward. After the storm with Leander had passed, our home finally settled into a calm, peaceful rhythm. During this peaceful time, when life finally felt calm and content, Soren brought someone special into our lives. Her name was Celine, and she was everything that Talia wasn't: kind, humble, and genuinely caring. As the weeks turned into months, their relationship grew stronger, and soon they announced their engagement. Their wedding was the complete opposite of Leander's extravagant affair. It was a simple, heartfelt ceremony right in our backyard. We decorated with flowers from the garden and homemade touches, surrounded by a small group of close friends and family. The day was perfect. During the reception, I pulled Soren aside, my heart full. "You've chosen a wonderful woman," I said, my voice thick with emotion. He squeezed my hand and smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. "I learned from the best," he replied, giving me a knowing look. Life seemed to move quickly after that. They sold the apartment I had given Soren, added some of their savings, and bought a small, cozy house just a few miles away. One sunny afternoon, While we were having tea in their new living room, Celine shared some wonderful news. Azura, we're expecting twins, she announced, her eyes shining with happiness. I nearly dropped my cup, overwhelmed with joy. Twins? Oh my goodness, that's amazing, I exclaimed. Soren's face lit up with pride. We wanted you to be the first to know. We're really happy, Mom. I repeated, twins, letting the words sink in as excitement filled me. Grandchildren, what a blessing. It was a new chapter, one I was so eager to begin. As for Leander, news about him was rare. The last I heard, he had divorced Talia. She had taken nearly everything in the split, leaving him to start over in another city. Despite the hurt he had caused, it still pained me to know he was out there somewhere, struggling because of his choices. One evening, as I was sitting and looking through old photo albums, Soren came and sat beside me. He noticed a picture of Leander and me from years ago. After a quiet moment, he asked softly, "Do you ever hear from him?" I shook my head.
No.
After everything, he's chosen his path, and I have to respect that, even if it breaks my heart. Soren put an arm around me. He's still my brother, Mom. Maybe one day he'll come around. I nodded, feeling a bittersweet hope. Maybe, I agreed, even though I wasn't really sure if he ever would. But for now, we had plenty to keep us busy, especially with those twins on the way. Soren chuckled. Yeah, you're about to be the busiest grandma in town. We both laughed, and the sound filled the room with warmth and joy. Despite the past, despite the mistakes and heartbreak, this moment with Soren felt like everything was exactly as it should be. Life was moving forward, and so were we, with new hopes and dreams just around the corner.